Good afternoon and welcome. We're going to give about 1 minute to allow everyone to come into the webinar. Glad you're here. Welcome. We'll get started here in just a moment. Okay, we'll get started in respect of your time. Thank you for being here. Good afternoon and welcome to our Back to School webinar. My name is Carla Warren. I'm a senior partner with the National Center for Grow Your Own. We are a national nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit that provides technical assistance to states and districts and educator prep providers who are seeking to start, expand, and grow registered apprenticeships in teaching and grow your own pathways. And we are so excited to present this webinar today for you with Missy Testerman, the 2024 National Teacher of the Year, who joined our staff in July, and we are thrilled to have her on board with this work. Let me tell you a little bit about Missy, and I'll turn it over to her and let her get started to inspire you and kick off the school year. So, Missy Testerman is the 2024 National Teacher of the Year. She just finished her year of service at the end of June and came on board with us in July. Prior to joining NCGYO, Missy served as a first and second grade teacher at Rogersville City School in Rogersville, Tennessee. For 3 decades, she was a classroom teacher, taking advantage in the latter part of her career of the state's Grow Your Own initiative and adding an ESL endorsement to her license so that she could teach her school's English learners. And she's going to tell you some great stories about that work. She served as an ESL specialist and ESL program director and also coordinated the system's summer programs as she served on the district leadership team. Missy was considered to be a staunch advocate for her students, their families, and her fellow teachers. She prioritized instruction that ensured that the students had the skills and knowledge necessary they need to achieve and be successful in the classroom. Missy considers her greatest contribution to her profession to be her love and desire for learning that she has instilled in countless students over the past 3 decades. Missy used her year of service as the National Teacher of the Year to empower teachers to advocate for their students and for their fellow educators by using their voices and sharing their experiences with those outside the classroom. She believes strongly in teachers embracing their role as education experts to inform decision makers of today's classroom experiences so that we can meet all of our students' needs. It is my privilege to be a colleague and to be presenting to you today Missy Testerman, the 2024 National Teacher of the Year. Welcome, Missy.
Thank you so much, Carla, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you to everyone who is joining us today from hopefully all around the country. I know some of you may have already started school because here in Tennessee, we've actually been back in school in our state for a couple of weeks. I know some of you may be starting this week or even next week. But no matter where you are in the process, whether you're a veteran in the school starting process or it's your very first year, I appreciate you joining the NCGYO team today, and I hope you'll enjoy our time together. So on the screen are a few photos of some of my students, the ones that I taught most recently whenever I taught English as a second language in Tennessee. So again, I want to thank you for being here, and we'll go ahead and get started. So, no teacher can go very long without talking about school, students, and all of the things that go on in our professional lives. As Carla mentioned, I taught first and second grades for 30 years before I ventured over into the English as a second language world, where I taught English language learners. I had taught for those 30 years and I had no intentions of changing anything. But my situation changed when my dear friend, who was our school's English as a second language teacher, told me that she would be moving at the end of the school year in order to be with her husband, who was taking a job in another part of Tennessee. Instantly, I was concerned about who would advocate and educate our school's English language learners. I had been so privileged to be the classroom teacher in first or second grades who was able to teach those students and to get to know them and their families, and they were very near and dear to my heart. Around that time, a few days later, I received an email from the state of Tennessee Department of Education that explained that certified teachers already teaching in Tennessee at that time could add an endorsement in a hard to fill licensure area at no cost. Well, my good luck would have it is because English as a second language and that endorsement was one of those options. So I enrolled in the coursework, completed the coursework rather secretly with just a few people knowing. My director of schools in Tennessee, we call them directors of school, and I know some places they're called superintendents. It's all the same exact thing. And my husband was aware, my daughter, there weren't a lot of other people that knew, but it worked out perfectly because by the time that my friend left to join her husband in another part of the state, I had passed my very first ever praxis at age 52, and I was now certified to teach English as a second language. So at the end of that school year, I became our school's English as a second language teacher, the English as a second language program director, and the Title III director. But this is Rogersville City School in beautiful Rogersville, Tennessee. Now, my school was a little bit different than most schools. Our school is a pre-kindergarten through eighth grade school that serves as the school system. So in other words, we are a one school system. We do not even have a high school. Once our students graduate eighth grade, they actually transfer into the county system where they finish their K-12 education. So all 650 of our students, all of our instructional staff, our administrative staff, our central office staff, and even our superintendent are housed in this one big building. So if you are in a system where you very seldom see your superintendent, that's probably a more likely occurrence because we saw ours all day, every day. He's a fabulous guy and he was really invested in the daily lives of our students. But my school has served the Rogersville, Tennessee community for over 100 years. This is my original caseload. The first year I moved into the ESL world, I had 21 students who each required 1 hour of daily English language services. It was a scheduling disaster, to be completely honest, but I had the best, hardest working teaching staff who worked with me and accommodated my students and me, and it ended up working perfectly. Whenever it was time for me to go on leave as the National Teacher of the Year at the beginning of the 2024-25 school year, I only had 2 students left on my caseload because all of the others had tested out of needing daily ESL services through their performance on, at that time, it was the annual WIDA exam. In Tennessee, we have since transitioned to our ESL students taking ELPA 21. But my students were able to demonstrate mastery the same as students who had been native speakers. But our school's level of growth for the ESL subgroup is significantly above the state and national averages, and it's consistently a 4 on federal accountability, which is the top level. And what that demonstrates is how hard my students are willing to work, how invested their families are in their education, and understanding that education will help them create a prosperous future. And it most definitely speaks to those classroom teachers who spent the other 6 hours each day with my students. One of the things that I'm so thankful for is that I worked with so many teachers who are talent scouts instead of deficit detectives. Instead of looking for things that students can't do, they consistently look for things that the students can do and capitalize on those. But I had some really interesting stories. I had two sets of identical twins. There's a row of twins on the first row, and there is another set of twins on one is on the second row and one is on the third row. But I've never loved teaching students as much as I loved these students. They just warmed my heart. They reminded me that it's a privilege to be an American, to be able to be educated for free in a public school in our country. And they were just absolutely a joy to spend time with. So, one thing that I try to always speak to is I'm speaking in my capacity as the 2024 National Teacher of the Year, is that every study ever done on student achievement has shown that the single most important school factor in a student's achievement is not technology, it's not textbooks, it's not programs or platforms, it's the quality of the teacher in front of the classroom. Every single time, it's the teacher. On the screen are two of the best I ever worked with who embraced my students, taught them at a really high, rigorous academic level, had really high expectations for them, and worked closely with me to ensure that my students met their goals. But it's the teacher every single time. So if you're joining this webinar today as a teacher, remember what you do is so incredibly important. You are the center of that classroom. If you teach young kids, you are basically the center of their world during school hours. And what you do during the school day matters every single day. And I appreciate everything that you do for your students, whether you teach kindergartners, whether you teach calculus to 12th graders. Every bit of it is important because in the United States, our educational system is set up on a continuum, and students have to have skills at one level before they can progress to the next level. If there's ever a skip anywhere in that continuum, their academic achievement will suffer. So thank you for everything that you do for your students to help them meet their goals and to be ready for the content that they take on the next year. So today you've joined because it's time for a new school year, either beginning one or you're in the first few weeks of a new school year. I always loved all of the excitement surrounding a new school year. I loved getting my classroom ready, even though my family used to joke that the first 2 to 3 times that I went to school to work on my classroom during the summer, all I did was stand there and walk around and look at the piles of things and then walk to another place in the classroom because I had to work it out in my head before I could start. But there's something so exciting about preparing a classroom for new learners and about all of the newness of a new school year. New crayons that aren't broken, new pencils that still have erasers, new glue bottles that still close the right way without leaking everywhere. And when the students show up on the first day, lots of times they're so excited to be there. They're excited to see their former teachers. They're excited to see you and to meet their classmates. And to me, it was just always such a wonderful part of the year for me was that very first day of school, all the prep leading up to it, and the first couple of weeks. So you'll notice there's just a planner on the top of the screen. That is the best that planner will look all year. If you're a teacher, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That planner is brand new. It doesn't have anything in it yet, but soon it will be filled with tasks that you need to do, notes that you need to remind yourself, things that your students need to accomplish, and it will be really full. So I want to start today talking about things that you can do before the school year ever starts, things that will make the rest of the school year easier for you. So for me, it was always mapping out the school year. I would sit down with my curriculum guides and the textbooks and all of the things, the standards that had to be covered that year. And it always did me a wealth of good to map out the school year and kind of keep myself on target so that I could keep my students learning on target. Now, I'm not going to lie and act like that was a totally academic endeavor and that all I did was to map out curriculum things. I also mapped out breaks. How many days between fall break and Thanksgiving break? How many Fridays between coming back after Christmas and until spring break? It's perfectly okay to map those things out. Teachers deserve breaks to recharge, and there's nothing wrong with knowing that's on your calendar. Plus, we had to have a really good time to know when to schedule doctor's appointments, right? So the joke is that teachers don't really get days off. They just get days to do doctor's appointments. On Martin Luther King Day, on President's Day, all of those are not unexpected, but all of those extra break days, that's when our children and teachers are going to the dentist, the doctor, those things. But mapping out the school year for me was such a pivotal part of starting back. Also, I did a lot of other things that seemed kind of crazy at the time. I would print out an entire sheet of mailing labels with each student's name on it. I taught first and second grades. That made it easier when students came in. I just slapped labels on everything they had. In fact, I gave them the sheet of labels with explicit instructions, and often they were able to help me complete that task. By the end of the school year, I'd used almost every single one of those labels because when you teach students, there are a lot of things to keep up with that need labels on them. Another thing that I always like to do on the at the very beginning of the school year, even before the school year started, truthfully in the summer, was to connect with colleagues. Now, some colleagues I talked to every day all during the summer. We were in a group chat together where we shared funny things and acted as though we were best friends. But I always tried to connect with new colleagues as well as colleagues that I thought maybe no one else had reached out to because teaching takes a community. I recently talked to a young lady that I had met during my year of service as the National Teacher of the Year. She was a student at a university in Texas and she had moved to North Dakota. I was able to connect her with some people that I knew in North Dakota in her same city, and they were able to connect her to her new colleagues. When she texted me a couple of weeks after she had gotten her job, the thing she was most excited about was that her grade level colleagues had added her to their teacher group text. And she was so excited. All of us, whether we're 5 or we're 75, we like to be included. So if you have a new colleague this year, make sure you reach out to that colleague. If you have a colleague that you think maybe no one else has reached out to, reach out to that person too. A lot of times, those of us who didn't teach a grade level or a certain area who had no one else, we kind of felt like orphans. I used to joke that going from the general classroom to teaching a specialty was like all of a sudden becoming an only child because I had no one else in my area. So remember those people too, those people who don't necessarily have a group to belong to. So even before the school year begins, one of the most important things that you can do is to make a plan for communicating with your families. The tone that you set before the school year begins will be the one that carries out through the whole school year. So as soon as you're able to do so, Establish contact with your families. You can use emails. You can text if your school uses a messaging app like Remind or something similar. Kids love to get postcards in the mail. Making phone calls that are positive and not just when students are in trouble or having academic struggles is very important. A lot of times I would let my students write letters or make drawings, create drawings, and I would mail them to their families. But when you're communicating with families, always remember to be proactive and prompt. If there's a problem, let parents know immediately. If a student does something during the school day that his or her mom or dad needs to know about, the best thing you can do is to make that phone call or that text, send that text immediately, because you being able to talk to the parent about what happened is going to make your life easier on the other end. I always tried to remember to phrase those incidents where you have to contact a parent for maybe not a positive reason as thinking of an Oreo. So you start with something good, you put the tricky, sticky stuff in the middle, and then you end with something positive. Because just because students may misbehave or have a bad day doesn't mean they're bad kids. It means that they need another chance tomorrow, and you're going to do better if you get the parent or the family to understand that you care about the student, you have his or her best intentions. Your intentions are pure and honest because you care about the student, and everyone can work together to help that student get back on track. I want to go back. Well, I'll keep going. I was going to go back for just a second. I want you to notice how alike my twins are. There's another photo I'll focus on in just a second. So that first day of school really sets the tone. It sets a tone for how students think they're going to be able to function in your classroom. So on that first day, make sure you're visible. Make sure you hug those former students who need that reassurance from you. And most importantly, avoid that first day carnival. You know what I'm talking about. Occasionally, I'll see a teacher who does everything except break out ponies on the first day of school. The kids are not doing anything similar to what they will do the rest of the year. So on the second day of school, they don't know where to hang up their backpack or how to access their locker or which things to get together or where there might be a list of said things. The best thing that you can do to make your life easier and also the lives of your students and your colleagues is to, on that very first day, establish those routines. If you want your students to come in and hang out backpacks and get out water bottles, show them how to do that the first day. If there's a centralized place where your seventh graders can see what they need for class, point that out the first day. That's going to make all of the subsequent days of school easier because you've established routines. I always like to tell everyone that it's easy to start firm and to loosen up later. If you start too loose with students, letting them do things that you typically aren't going to allow, it's going to be really difficult to rein them in, particularly for those of you who teach middle school and those of you who teach high school. I feel like it's very, very important that you start firm and you can always loosen up later. No one will protest that way. I always like to take a lot of photos from the first day of school. This is one of a colleague that I worked with, an excellent teacher named Mrs. Houseright, and one of my sweet students, just to remember the newness of that first day. And also, it's a good chance to see how students have grown. Because I taught a primary grade, one of my favorite things to do, in addition to photos, was to actually measure my students by clipping off a piece of yarn that was the exact same height they were. And then we would do it again at the end of the year and turn it into a math lesson where they measured to see how tall they were at the end of the year and how much they had grown throughout the school year that year. So make that first day special. Do something worth talking about at home. Sometimes I would even coach my students and say, tonight, when your mom asks what you did, tell her, we measured ourselves, and at the end of the year, I'll get to see how much I'd grown. But do something that's worth going home and talking about, and remember to send them home smiling, because not every day is as exciting as the first day. So the next day, you want them to be ready to come back, whether you teach little kids or whether you teach middle school or high school kids, always send them home smiling and ready to come back the next day. A lot of times this year, someone would ask, what is the best tip that you have for teachers? Well, actually, for me, there are a couple of things. Number one, always keep in mind that your attitude toward your students is going to impact their achievement. That means the teachers have to hold really high expectations for students. We have to hold the belief and actually believe that all students are capable of big things. All students are capable of learning, of making progress, and of meeting their goals. So we have to believe that, and in turn, we have to teach that way by having high expectations, exposing them to rigorous academic grade level content is incredibly important. But my very best tip for building rapport with students, it's cheap, it's easy. As a matter of fact, it's free, and it gives tremendous returns. And I know that sometimes whenever teachers hear this, they just are taken aback a little, but this tip is really simple. I would invite my students to come eat lunch with me. Now, whenever I taught in the general classroom, I would have scheduled days. Occasionally, I made the mistake of just saying, if you did this or that or whatever, if you sit at table one, you're welcome to come bring your tray and come back up and we'll have lunch together. But what I found was that that led to them asking me all day, every day, if their table could come to lunch. So whenever I moved into the ESL world, I had so many students needing services that I didn't have a lot of extra time. I had just a few minutes for lunch. So one of the things that I would do was to invite my fourth graders to come eat their lunch while I was working with my fifth graders and vice versa. And then we would lend into just kind of making that an extended lunchtime for one group or the other, depending on which way that schedule alternated. But I feel like that's a reason that my students were able to improve their speaking scores so quickly. Because if you teach English as a second language, one of the ways that your students are assessed on the WIDA or ELPA exam is that they have to actually use academic language in sentences and in responses, and then they were scored on those responses. So I added in those types of activities to our lunch sessions. It wasn't just talking and giggling and hearing fifth grade and fourth grade gossip. It was also that I would have cards out with academic vocabulary that they needed to know, and we would tell stories using that vocabulary. The funny part is that I really felt like that my students felt like that was cheesy, but they liked being in my classroom for lunch. But when most of them tested out after that first year, the next year they asked if they could continue coming to lunch with me. My schedule looked a lot better then because I didn't have students all day, every minute of the day. But the first time we had lunch, I had sixth graders who were disappointed that I didn't have the vocabulary cards out because turns out they actually liked that activity. But whenever you share a meal with students, sometimes even those students who are guarded and don't feel like sharing much about themselves, sometimes they open up with their friends in those smaller groups when they're not intimidated by all the noise and chaos of the cafeteria. For my English language students, it was very important that they felt like they were in a safe situation and they were able to share stories and time with each other. So that's probably my very best teacher talk. Find times when everything's not so scripted and regimented and actually enjoy your students and the things that they share with you. So have a little news flash. It's a bit of bad news. You're going to have some stress this year. In fact, I guarantee it. It's not the stress that will kill you. It is how you feel about that stress. So it's best if you prepare for it and react to the stress in a way that helps you deal with it. I'm actually reading a book right now by a neuroscientist about how our attitudes concerning workplace stress affect how the toll that the stress takes on us. And it seems as though decades of research show that if you expect that the stress in your life is going to impact your health, it probably will. If you're able to change your mindset and see that stress is just an opportunity to showcase your skills and to grow stronger, then it ends up being you end up having healthier outcomes, both emotionally and physically. So, teaching is stressful. It is one of the most stressful professions that exists. Teachers make a lot of decisions. Something I read once said that the younger your students are, the more decisions you have to make per day. And sometimes teachers are making thousands of decisions every single day. It may explain that why when we get home, we don't really want to think and we don't want to have to decide anything else. But there are some things that you can do to make sure that you've planned ahead for your for stress so that everything doesn't just end up fine. And by fine, I mean the kind of fine when you get home and someone puts away a dish in the incorrect place and you go off the deep end and then you mutter, it's fine. Because what that kind of fine actually means is that frustration is never ending. We don't want you to get there. So I want to show you this photo and tell you the story of this little guy. This little guy is a bilingual student in my school. He was not one of my students because his family spoke two languages at home, Spanish and English. I was able to screen him because they had indicated there was another language spoken in the home, and in Tennessee, that's how we screen English language learners. But he didn't need my services. He was already fluent in English and Spanish. But I was in his classroom on the first day of kindergarten, or first day of first grade, excuse me. And there was another student who was having a complete meltdown. You know, the kind of talking about where he's on the floor, basically rolling around. So the teacher and another adult were trying to deal with that. So I was trying to keep everyone else calm. And another student asked, "What's wrong with so and so?" referring to the other child. I said, "It's okay. The first day of school is stressful, and I think that he's a little frustrated." This little guy looked at me and said, "I don't ever feel stressful." I said, "Well, that's amazing. I'm going to have to figure out your plan." He said, "I don't ever feel stressful because I'm a boy and I don't wear stresses, just girls do." So obviously he didn't understand stresses and dresses and the difference, but there are some things that you can do to prepare yourself for stress and also to help yourself get through them. So the easiest one for me is sunshine. A lot of times I feel like we can reset ourselves when we just have a little bit more sunshine. If you're a teacher like I was who didn't have access to playground time due to schedule constraints, sometimes I felt like it lifted my mood just to take a walk outside in the sun for just a few seconds in between picking up different groups of students. I would like to tell you that when I get stressed out, I want to eat pears, bananas, and strawberries. I do not. But eating in a healthy way is good for our bodies. It helps us get prepared for and overcome stress. If you like to read, read. If you like to do yoga, if you like to exercise, if you like to paint, if you enjoy spending time with your dog or your little ones, do the things that are you, the things that make you who you are outside of school. Because no one said that you have to be a teacher 24/7. And you're actually going to be a better teacher if you're not a teacher 24/7. If you're an individual with your own likes and dislikes outside of school, you're actually going to be more rounded and better able to handle the stresses of the classroom. I just noticed that one guy looks like he's dancing. I meant to show that, or he looks like he's jumping. I meant to show that he was dancing. Maybe he's dancing and jumping because people like to do that as well. But I encourage you to do the things that help you deal with the stress that's going to come up this year. Along those lines, take care of each other. These are two very dear colleagues of mine, Carol and Mary Jo. When I was young, before I started teaching, I had this dream. I wanted to work with really cute, young, trendy young people, and I wanted us to do cute, young, trendy things. And that did not happen because my school placed me with really old people when I first started teaching. They were in their early 30s. They already had families and kids, but it was the best thing to happen to me because those ladies took such good care of me. They showed me how to teach, they showed me how to be an effective teacher, and they invested so much time and energy in helping mold me into the teacher that I ended up being. The lady on the left was not a teacher initially. She was my paraprofessional. She knew so much already because she had been in a classroom situation about 10 years as a paraprofessional before we met. I was able to convince Carol to go back to school to add on to finish up a degree she had started. She ended up being my daughter's classroom teacher. We taught together for 20 years, and now Carol serves on the Rogersville City School Board, and I'm so incredibly proud of her. The lady on the right was my first mentor teacher. Her name was Mary Jo. There were times that I'm sure I frustrated Mary Jo to absolutely no end with my cluelessness, but every time she helped me fix some gaffe I'd made, she did so with love. Because what Mary Jo understood was that the love she was investing in me was going to come back out into my students. She was my best supporter, even when there were times later when she said to me privately, "I really can't believe you did that." But it was the privilege of a lifetime to be mentored by both of these ladies. And that's really how we build a legacy of strong teachers. We teach the things that we know to the teachers coming after us. So if there's a new teacher or a novice teacher in your area, give that person some grace. They're learning how to teach. If you're a younger teacher and there's someone that you think is old and just out of date, give that person some grace because I guarantee that they have some wisdom that would be to your advantage. Studies on school climate show that teachers are happiest in schools when there is a good mix of veteran teachers, teachers who've taught between 10 and 15 years, and teachers with less than 5 years of experience because it takes all of us. It takes our younger teachers bringing the energy. Our teachers in the middle still have the energy, but they're gaining wisdom. And our teachers at the opposite end have that wisdom. And it takes all of us working together to create this legacy of strong teachers. As we get ready to close, I want to remind you that public education is a dignity creator. We take students from every single ability and background, and through rigorous high-level academic instruction and high expectations, we help make their wildest dreams come true. Teachers create every other profession. Doctors, lawyers, nurses, pilots, TikTokers, Instagrammers, YouTubers, more teachers for the future, you name it. That's a lot to hold, a lot of responsibility to hold. And as a teacher, you're going to hold a lot of power over the students in your classroom. Always remember to wield that power with justice, mercy, and humility. So I want to remind you again what you do matters every single day. And I want to thank you for investing in your students each and every day and for all of the things that you do to make public education the force that changes lives all day, every single day. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to pause for just a second. That's my contact info on the screen, including my own personal email address. If there's a time this year when you just need to vent to someone or you have a question that you want to ask someone privately, please reach out. I've never had anyone abuse the access to having that email address out there. And so I would love to hear from you. I'd like to hear how your year's going. And I thank you again for everything you do to invest in America's students. So we're going to move into the Q&A part. I just learned yesterday that there is a feature that will let you ask questions. If you have any questions, you can put those and one of our moderators will ask those. But thank you again on behalf of the staff of NCGYO. Thank you for everything you do and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Missy. As always, inspired every single time I hear you speak.
Thank
So
you.
we do have a Q&A feature. Feel free to pop any questions you have into the Q&A, and we'll pause for a few minutes to allow you to do that, and then we'll close before the top of the hour. We appreciate Missy giving her contact information out. Of course, you can contact her through NCGYO as well. As you're coming up with any questions you potentially have, we will be posting this webinar on our website, the ncgyo.org, the National Center for Grow Your Own. We encourage you to go to that website if you want to learn more about our organization and about the work that we're doing, particularly some of the work that Missy's engaging in. And we do have questions. So inspiring. What are some ways you integrate parents into your classroom community?
Oh, that is a great question. So I was always welcome. I was always welcoming to parents who wanted to be part of the classroom community. If they had a skill they wanted to come show, I was willing for them to do that. If they wanted to come be a reading tutor, within about 10 minutes, I can show just about anyone ways that they can effectively be a helper in our classroom. And so I always tried to make sure that parents were very included. I sent texts to parents through our school's messaging app. I would send photos, particularly if there were those situations where a student had a really bad morning and mom or dad let me know it was a tornado at our house this morning, not a literal tornado, but they had a rough morning. Just to ease their mind that they did not cry all day at school. Because, as parents, sometimes I think we drop our students off, and if they're upset, we assume they're just going to be upset all day, and it just kills us to think about it, and we feel guilty because there's no guilt like mom or dad guilt in the whole world. But most of the time, within a few seconds, a couple of minutes, they're fine. So I always try to do those types of things to reassure parents. One of the best things that my colleagues and I did a few years ago was before school started, even before we went back for in-service, we would invite our families to something we called popsicles at the park, because it was simply cheap popsicles at the park. And we would take our students' beginning of the year paperwork and have it available for families to take home so they then could send it back or bring it back either on open house night or on the first day of school. And that was such a non-threatening environment, and a good way to make connections with your families, because there wasn't the stress of school. Sometimes parents don't always feel like they can come to school, or they have some school anxiety of their own, but doing it in the park was a great opportunity to make that really low stress. And that was one of my favorite things to do as a general ed classroom teacher.
Great advice. Okay, next question. So, Missy, did you always know you wanted to be a teacher? And if not, what inspired your decision?
Carla, that's a fabulous question. So I think I always knew I wanted to become a teacher from the very first moment that I went to kindergarten and saw my kindergarten teacher. I just knew. Her name was Mrs. Brown, and she was so warm and welcoming, and I wanted to be just like her. I would come home and get off the bus and put on a dress with a cardigan, because that's the teacher uniform. It's kind of funny. 50 years later, it's still the teacher uniform. And I would set up my dolls and make my 2-year-old sister play school with me. So I was really lucky to have a lot of teachers who nurtured that desire when I was really young. My second grade teacher told me that I could be a teacher. She was even the first person to ever mention the word college to me, because no one in my 7-year-old world had ever gone to college. But she said to be a teacher, You have to grow up and go to college. And so she was the first person to ever plant the seed that I could be a teacher. And I'm so grateful to her for that.
Absolutely. Love it. So we'll close with this question. I want you to think back over your over 3 decade career. What's one back to school moment that has stayed with you and continues to inspire you in your educational journey?
Oh, that's a great question because I love the whole back to school excitement. Carla, I have to think, or I know this situation. I had a family when I was teaching second grade that I had contacted to tell them about the popsicle party and the back to school night. And the mom was very, very open with me. She, in my community, if you've lived here a long time, everyone knows everyone, but I did not know this family. They had not lived in our town for very long. But the mom was honest with me on the phone and told me that she herself had a lot of school anxiety. She did not like being within the school. She had apparently had a negative experience herself as a young child. So she told me they probably wouldn't be at the popsicle party. They probably would not come to open house, but her child would be there on the first day. Well, the day of open house, I called her again and I offered to come meet her a little bit early. That way, if she wanted to go ahead and be in our classroom when everyone else arrived, maybe that wouldn't feel as intimidating. And so I went to our school lobby and I kind of waited, and our lobby had an entrance on each side of the building. So I kind of paced back and forth thinking she's not going to come. And I saw her, and she had her kids all dressed up, so cute. She looked so cute herself, but she was a nervous wreck. But I opened the door, hugged her little ones, even the little one that wasn't going to be in my classroom. And she told me it was the first time she'd ever felt relaxed in the school. And she became one of my very best parent helpers after that. She ended up coming in every Tuesday for an hour to listen to my students read. She became a really strong help to me. She later joined my school's substitute list, and she substituted probably the next 20 years for my district. So teachers have that power not only to get kids hooked on learning and on being in school, but also to bring their parents along for that joy as well.
Thank you for sharing that story. Power of relationships, absolutely.
Absolutely.
So, thank you, Missy, for sharing your time and your wisdom and your inspiration with us today. And thank you to everyone who joined. We hope this session leaves you energized and ready to start a strong school year. As you head back to your classrooms and your schools, remember the power of connection, engagement, and high expectations for every student. We will post this webinar on the National Center for Grow Your Own website, ncgyo.org. Please watch our LinkedIn profile for additional webinars as we move through the school year. And again, thank you for giving us a valuable hour of your time. And thank you, Missy, for inspiring us. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you.